Guys, welcome back to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going to discuss another very important interview question. But we are just going to cover the theory for now. So the question is, what are the different types of trigger events? Now, before we start the different types of trigger events, let's talk about what the event is. So event is a situation when the trigger will happen. That is what the event is. If that event occurs, that's when the trigger should get fired. Means, what do you mean by trigger getting fired? Trigger getting fired means the trigger will get executed. That is what the trigger fired means. So there are different types of events. The events are categorized into two main categories. One is before trigger and the other one you have is after trigger. Now, what is the difference between before and after trigger? Before trigger means before the record gets updated or inserted into the database. Before you push anything to the database, those are called the before triggers. After triggers are the triggers is when you have already inserted them or you have already updated them and they have been saved to the database. You want to perform the action. That is what is called as the after events, like after insert, after update, after delete, after undelete. Similarly, before update, before delete, before insert. So those are before events. So let's go ahead and talk about these events one by one. So before events is before inserting the record into the database, the trigger will be fired. That is what the before insert will do. Before update will before you update a record. Means before you update a record, the trigger will be fired. So before you modify the record and before that record saves into the database, that's when the trigger will be fired. So for example, let's say you are talking about a product. You are trying to update a product record. Let's say you want to make sure that the product code follows the certain naming convention. So before you make any changes or before you can fire this trigger update to make sure that you can only update only if it follows a certain naming convention. Similarly, let's say in the case of before insert, if you are trying to create a new product record, you want to make sure that anytime you add a product record, the product code should be added, should have append with the word cloud parlay. Let's say. Okay, so what you can do is, so before the record gets inserted, the trigger will be fired and this is what the logic will be executed. Starting of any code will be start from cloud parlay plus product code. So every product code will have cloud parlay at the starting. So these are the before events. Similarly, before delete means before you delete the record, you want to make sure something is correct. Let's say you are trying to delete an account record, but you want to follow a rule saying that you can only delete an account record if that particular account has no contacts. Only in that case, you should be able to delete the account. And if that account has contacts associated with it, then you should not be able to delete that account. So that kind of checking you can write inside of this trigger and that trigger will be fired before you delete. So before you delete, you want to make sure if the account has no associated contacts or it has associated contact or if it has contact associated with that account, you should not allow the deletion of that. So you can write a trigger and you can say that when that trigger should get fired, you can write down the events on which trigger will be fired. Similarly, you have after insert, after update, after delete, and after undelete. And as the name indicates, it's very simple, it's self-explanatory. After insert a newly entered record into a database, that's when the trigger will be fired. After update is after you have modified the record and once it has been saved to the database, that's when the trigger will be fired. After delete is after you have deleted a record and you want to perform an action, that's when this trigger will be fired. Then you have is after undelete. So once the record is deleted and then it has been saved back from the recycle bin back to the object, and then this will be executed and that's when the trigger will be fired. So these are the different types of events which can fire the trigger and you can write down when the trigger should get fired. So you can specify the events which should fire the trigger. Fire the trigger means code for the trigger will get executed. So these are the different type of events that are available. So let's meet in next tutorial. Till then, have a good day. Bye.